had time to start grading the Chapter 1 work yet. I plan on spending at least part of my weekend getting that done, so you guys aren't waiting on your grades. It was just a very substantial week of grading. I apologize. I normally get grades turned around in 2 to 3 days. This week is the exception, not the rule. We're going to be continuing Chapter 2 today because we're talking about the elements of an e-commerce business model. Your next assignment is going to be to apply the 8 key elements of a business model to your idea in the same way we did in class on Wednesday. It's due on the 7th, so you have all week next week to get this done. I did provide you guys a PowerPoint template for this as well, so feel free to use that to your advantage. We're going to start off, though, with some discussion. Some of you know this because you've had me for class already today, but this is a big weekend for 2 reasons. What are they? Groundhog Day is one, and what's the other one? It's the Super Bowl. So we have big things happening this weekend. Let's talk about the big business of the big game. It's funny, I can't even use the Super Bowl logo on my slides because if it showed up on Google, they would probably pull it down for copyright. You cannot use the term Super Bowl when you're advertising your bar or restaurant either. You're technically violating copyright. That being said, guys, check out the prices this year. We're looking at $5.6 million per commercial for 30 seconds. $5.6 million. 0.3 up from last year. And on average, depending on the game and how many timeouts there are and everything else, about 42 commercials actually got played last year. Seems like more, but that's about the rate of it. And we're looking at total viewership last year. Because last year's metrics, 100.7 million. All that stuff sounds pretty juicy and enticing to advertisers. What's changing about the way we're consuming the game at this point? What's different about the way people are watching the Super Bowl? Yeah, we're streaming these days. Some people are doing it legally, some people are doing it illegally. And that's actually a pretty big deal because today, Roku's contract with Fox Sports expires. There is no current contract between Fox Sports and Roku. So if you're a Roku streaming subscriber this weekend, are you going to get to watch the Super Bowl? You are not. I'll be interested to see if they resolve this conflict by, say, the end of the day, depending on what Roku is willing to pay for this. But it's still pretty interesting to think about. The other part of it that's interesting, too, I was talking a little bit about this morning. This is going to be one of the first times we've seen really heavily politicized Super Bowls. And in fact, the 2 major candidates are spending big bucks to be able to have airtime and commercials. Who are the candidates who are going to be spending that money? Yes? Exactly right. Trump is a well-publicized person with a big war chest. What's going on with Bloomberg? I know we don't often talk about politics. How's this guy making this happen? Yes. Yeah, this guy just sat and watched the world burn for most of the last year, and now he's getting into the race because he's got the money to do so. It's going to be interesting to see how people respond to this. I personally hate the politicizing of sports. I think it's something people should be able to enjoy without that aspect of it, but I think unfortunately it's going to be invading that game again this year as well. How many of you are going to be watching the game? How many of you are watching mainly for the commercials? Can't wait to see who ends up being the winner on this one. And guys, we left off talking a little bit about some e-commerce business models, and I want to make the point that we have a lot of crossover as well. Before we get into that, though, any questions or comments about where we're headed so far? Is everything making sense? What questions or comments do you have? Anything? Okay, let's jump in, guys. In terms of the way we categorize e-commerce business models, we've got, and for the guys who have nothing to write with, please take notes on something. Make me feel like my words matter. They don't matter past 5 o'clock when I get in the house, but I get paid for it to matter here. So help me feel good about myself. I'm not putting that on a recording just in case my wife is out there listening. Guys, I love you, honey. I really do. The ways that e-commerce is laid out, we've got 2 major contributions to this. We've got business to business, and we've got business to consumer. Well, these things can be divided by that. They can be divided by the actual technology we're using, whether we're using mobile, whether we are using, for example, database transactions. We have different models that show up repeatedly. And the most successful companies, however, are going after more than one model because of some of the enablers we have. So guys, in terms of each of these models, we're going to be talking through them today from the most primal form of e-commerce, which are e-tailers, all the way down to service providers. And here's the trick, guys. What constitutes an e-commerce company is getting fuzzier and fuzzier all the time. If we're talking about e-tailers, this is the most common version of e-commerce when we talk about traditional business-to-consumer e-commerce. You're basically talking about selling things at a profit. A virtual merchant is somebody who only sells online. If we had to think of a company that sells primarily online or only online, what's the first company we would probably think of? Is there one at this point that we would immediately think of? Yeah. 10 years ago, I said Amazon. Why am I not saying Amazon now? Yes? Yeah, we've got the Go stores now. We've got other storefronts. We're even setting up bookstores. But we've got virtual merchants in some fields, for example, companies that only sell online, but they're few and far between. One I would think of, for example, because I buy a lot of comic book collectibles, there's a company called Big Bad Toy Store, and they only sell online. That would be an example of a virtual merchant. Bricks and clicks. The best example I can think of there would be Target to the uneducated. You can buy online, you can pick up in store. That's bricks and clicks merchants. Catalog merchants. How many of you have actually ever bought anything from a paper catalog? What catalog?
It was in elementary school at the Scholastic Book Fair, or not the Scholastic things that they used to send out.
Oh, those were the best. Yeah, I remember those. And did anybody get Riff books as a kid? They used to have a program called Riff. Reading is fundamental. And they made the fun all capital letters, so they trick kids into thinking reading was fun. Reading was fun, but yeah, so I missed that stuff. But catalogs were a big deal. In fact, the Sears catalog changed American life. We're not going to talk about that too much today because we're going to talk about it later. But catalogs basically were physical paper catalogs you got. And those folks had a really easy time adapting to e-commerce. Why is that? I'm thinking about Cabela's. I'm thinking about Sears back when they existed. I'm thinking about JCPenney. Why did these companies have such an easy time adapting from traditional business? Yes? The infrastructure was already there. They knew how to fulfill orders. They had to digitize it. But in the old days, guys, I have to tell you, in the old days, you looked forward to Christmas when the JCPenney Christmas catalog came out. Every toy you could ever dream of was in those pages. When you didn't have a shopping mall within your house, you had a JCPenney catalog. And those folks had an easy way of adapting this stuff. And then we get into manufacturer direct. Guys, this is a big one these days. It's one of these things that took some time to gain speed. But let me ask you, in this room, has anybody ordered directly from Nike or Converse or Under Armour? Raise your hand if you have. Why is that sometimes a better experience than buying through a third party? What's the advantage? Yes? So you got a quality issue? Yes.
Just don't have like that dreaded, we're out of stock.
Yeah, you know you're getting what you asked for. Has anybody ordered custom from any of those companies yet? I've been lusting after a custom pair of Converse Chucks I'm waiting to pull the trigger on when I can justify $120 for a pair of Converse Chucks. But I know I can do it. The barriers are pretty low. I mean, we've got to set up websites, you've got to buy a domain, but it's far less expensive than setting up an actual storefront and building a store. So the most fundamental model is e-tailing. Then we get into what we refer to as community providers. The general term for this are social networks. Guys, I would argue that the first social networks that were out in the world of online commerce were places like MSN, places like Google, before we even had Google+, when people were gathering all their news, email, and all their communications from the same place. Guys, Facebook is built around advertising, but it's increasingly becoming where we get our news. It's increasingly becoming where we buy stuff. How many of you have ever bought something from Instagram? Yeah, and by next year, I bet twice as many people will have done that. So why are these so powerful, guys? We start talking about the power of community providers, a la social networks. Why are these such powerful agents for e-commerce? What's so built in and baked in about this format? Why are social networks good for e-commerce? Any thoughts? I know it's Friday afternoon. Please.
All your interests and stuff are just right there. It's easy to target you with the product.
correct. Guys, how many of you think, and just show a answer, that people could learn an awful lot about you from reading your social media profile? Raise your hand if you believe that. Yeah, I believe it too. If you checked out my social media profile, you know a lot of things about bass guitar, Batman, and Jack Russell dogs, because I love Jack Russells. You know everything about me. Well, it makes it very easy for companies to target to us. It makes it very simple for companies to know about us. Is there another aspect of social networks that make them so powerful in e-commerce? We know that there's the targeting aspect. I want to hear from this side of the room. What's another reason they're powerful in e-commerce? Yes?
I think people, because we're just on social media a lot, so we're constantly scrolling on our phones, and it hits for like these advertisements, and then we're like to purchase something. But they just are on social media a lot.
So we're always on it. It's always there in front of us. What else?
It's a successful product if you're able to see the real-time feedback on what you're about to buy.
Does this suck or not? Should I buy this thing? For example, I heard about this one-wheeled skateboard. I hear it's a lot of fun, but I heard some people. I saw this video clip of this woman making this incredible leap off of it in front of a crowd of people. Have you seen this one?
I was there.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So my point is, we can very quickly share information. We know what's cool. We know what we want to buy, and it's easy to target to us. So how do these companies make revenue? If you're Facebook, it's so funny. I know I talk about Facebook because I'm a Gen Xer and we can't get enough Facebook. Like, you guys like ranch dressing? That's how my generation likes Facebook. Can I have some Facebook with my pizza, please? Can you put some extra Facebook on the side of my Mexican, please? I'd like some more Zuckerberg with my salad. That's the way we feel about this stuff. My point is, though, there's always a conspiracy theory that comes around about every 6 months where somebody will say, they're starting to charge for Facebook now. No, they're not. Because you're already paying cover charge with your personal information and giving up your privacy. Here's the other trick too, guys. What's your number one social network? Not necessarily all you specifically, but your generation. Twitter's popular, but it's not the number one. Yep, who owns Instagram? Yep, it's the same data set. They're getting the same information, but they're packaging it differently. Some social networks are charging subscriptions at this point. I mean, we're talking about, for example, if you're promoting yourself on LinkedIn and going for the premium subscription service, for example. But most of it comes down to advertising and selling your information to third parties. That's why it's so powerful. And so in terms of content providers, this is something that has grown so quickly, guys. If we start talking about where we get our content, whether we're talking about YouTube, whether we're talking about, for example, Netflix, whether we're talking Hulu, there's so many different ways to get this content. How many of you get a version of Hulu that shows ads? I get that same version, and it's still advertiser supported. We're still paying a subscription. If you're getting Hulu with ads, you're probably getting a Spotify subscription. But it's a powerful place to target us because videos are like train wrecks. We cannot look away. We have to look and see what's going in front of us. And even though we like to say we ignore it, sometimes it's easier just to sit there and watch it. Now, in terms of how this stuff works, if you're paying for Netflix, yeah, it's a subscription. If you are using YouTube, it's all about advertising, unless you're paying for YouTube Red. Does anybody have a pay YouTube subscription, by the way? Yeah, I don't. Why has that not caught on? Yes? I think they waited too long. You know, I think it was it's funny because Google doesn't make a lot of mistakes. But I think they waited too long on this one because nobody's paying for it. We're all just putting up with the ads. So some of the other ways that they make these subscription models work, again, offering discounts. If you are Amazon Prime, you're just giving people the content along with the subscription. There's also what we refer to as syndication and aggregators. Guys, in the old days, if you were doing RSS feeds, does anybody still participate in aggregating RSS? Have you guys ever even heard of the term RSS? It stands for really simple syndication. And what that meant, for example, I used to get my news from multiple sources. I had an RSS reader on my desktop that would get news clippings from multiple news sources and put them in one place for me. If we're talking syndication, it means we're repurposing content and putting it other places. An example would be, how many of you have Roku? You use a Roku player? Anybody? How about anybody use a Fire Stick? When you get to those channels where they are essentially rebroadcasting other people's content, have you seen those? Like they kind of mimic cable channels. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like Pluto TV, stuff like that. That's an example of a syndication unit. and they basically repurpose content. Then we get into portals. Now, portals are things that are kind of hard to tell from social networks, because when we start thinking about the old days, I'm talking about the days when people had Yahoo or AOL, for example, or people were using MSN. That stuff's starting to resemble social networks as much as content providers and as much as traditional portals at this point in time. So when we start talking about traditional portals, we're talking about places where people go to get email and information, maybe not as social as a social network. But if you're still using something like Yahoo, you're still using something like MSN, their primary revenue models still are advertising. For example, in addition to your St. Francis email, how many of you use a Google account of your own? Why is Google giving us all this stuff for free? Yes? Exactly right. We think about it, guys. In the last month of your lives, beside Gmail, will somebody tell me a Google product they've used? Google Drive, okay. What else have you guys used? Nobody's used Maps? Yeah, that's Google as well. So we're talking Google Drive. We're talking Google Docs. There's endless amounts of Google stuff we can get. I can't wait to see what happens with Google Stadia to see if it's legit. But all this stuff is being underwritten by advertising. Google's number one source of revenue, even in 2020, even with 15 or 20 years of Google behind us, their number one source of advertising or revenue is still advertising. And so the idea that portal is feeding that information. Then we get into something we call a transaction broker, a business to consumer model where basically we're selling from one company or one person to a company, or I should say a company to a person, and we're charging a fee. A good example of a transaction broker, for example, would be third-party resellers for concert tickets. Has anybody ever had to go that route to get to a show they wanted to get? How much extra did you pay? It sucks, doesn't it? It's like, these are terrible human beings who do these things, but they're making money as a transaction broker. In many ways, it's funny. When you go to the movies, for example, if any of you still go to see movies in the theater, theaters are making very little money off actual ticket sales. They get a small transaction fee, and they're making most of their money on the $18 buckets of popcorn that they're selling. So transaction fees mean anytime we are doing something and charging a fee for it, that's a transaction fee. Examples are, for example, if you're doing online stock trades, you're paying a fee for that. If you're booking through Expedia.com, for example, you're paying a transaction fee there. If you're buying concert tickets, you get the wonderful and always popular convenience charge. That's got to be to me, that's the worst name they could have given that. Is that convenient? Is that convenient for you, Joe? There's not a damn convenient thing about it. What would be a better name for that? The asshole fee, the screw you charge, the kiss our ass fee, something like that. But convenience, that's just insulting things. For example, Ryan, if I gave you an undeserved D on a paper, and I said, well, that's a convenience grade, how would you feel about that? It was convenient for me because I didn't have to read your paper. And I'd be turning around, he'd be throwing up his finger at me, it'd be terrible. That wouldn't be convenient for anybody. So anyway, but that's what a transaction model is all about. You understand. Then we get into market creators, guys. When we think about people who create businesses that solve the need and something we didn't even realize we needed, guys, check this out. I can think of no better example in the modern workforce than Uber. It solved a problem that nobody knew how to solve. So there are some businesses that are business to consumer that are so unique that they create their own market. Can anybody think of something that's not representative? We're talking about Priceline and eBay. We have Uber, we have Airbnb, which I would also argue is a consumer to consumer potentially. Is there anything else we've seen in the last 10 years that has been so unique or revolutionary, it's changed the way the business is done? Anything you can think of? I would totally think Netflix. Because consider, how did Netflix get started? They were doing USBs with actual DVDs and Blu-rays. You used to have to pay the upgrade to get Blu-rays because you're getting extra resolution, right? I don't think so. But it comes down to people who create something that's so completely unique. Now, there's been some effects on this stuff. I'm going to explain to you, by the way, how Priceline came into being. Guys, this is a little bit of a story, but what the hell, it's Friday. Stories are good once in a while, right? I promise I won't swear as much this time. You guys got me started. Somebody in the crowd swore that gave me permission. So that being said, how this came about. There's a story about a time in my life before you guys were invented. And it was pre-9/11. And it was a wonderful period for air travel. Because air travel was nonstop. You could get reasonably priced nonstop flights just about anywhere in the country. Sometimes, guys, I remember flying in planes where literally, one time I was one of about 4 people on a 737. The entire plane was empty, but they still had to run the flight. Do airplanes do that now? Do airlines do that now? Has anybody here ever been on a flight that was less than half full? It does not happen. Here's why. In the aftermath of 9/11, the airline industry almost went bankrupt. It was really tough to make profitable flights. Non-stop flights ceased being. As a result, we started cobbling together flights from smaller regional flights. If you want to know why you get so many layovers on a flight these days, it's because the technology exists now to cobble together itineraries out of multiple short flights, and nobody wants to pay for the big flights anymore. When companies like Priceline came out and said, look, you've got all this unsold capacity, we're going to help you more efficiently cobble together flights to places people actually want to go, and we're going to sell them on the cheap so that you don't have empty seats on your flights. And it's a big part of the reason why you don't see empty flights anymore. It's the same deal with hotels. If you've got real estate that's sitting without people in, even if you're not making your normal fee, it's better to sell a $200 a night hotel for $45 than to make nothing and have it sit empty. And that's where that business model came from. Here's the other part too, guys. We know that Uber has had some effects on the ecosystems within which it operates. What's been the biggest effect that Uber has had on traditional business? Who has it affected negatively? Yeah, because it couldn't keep up. It killed those industries. Is Airbnb having an unintended consequence? What is it?
Like the people in the big cities, instead of renting their places, they're just putting on Airbnb to make more money.
Exactly right. Airbnb and who's the other one? I'm trying to remember the Airbnb and who's the other similar company? Can't think of it today. They're helping drive the housing crisis in many areas. Because if you're in Colorado Springs and everybody wants to be there right now to go skiing, are you going to rent somebody a monthly fee for your house, or are you going to rent it every night to somebody else and make a buku more bucks? You're going to do the Airbnb thing. So Airbnb is actually, VRBO, that's the other one. Those two companies are actually helping drive the housing crisis in many parts of the United States right now. Unintended consequence. So then we get into service providers, guys. And this can be anything. For example, we talked about Google Maps and Gmail and all these things. You notice there are also parts of things like portals. These things can be parts of multiple business models. If you are doing something like Google, Gmail, Google Maps, whatever, your value proposition is you're giving people a lot of service for nothing, essentially, at least on the superficial level. And the primary advertising model for this, or the primary revenue model, I should say, is advertising. By the way, guys, we talked about it a little bit. We're going to be getting into it more when we get into things like geofencing. When we get into things like Google Maps, why is that such a powerful potential revenue model? How does Google make money off Google Maps? What do you think? Yes?
Like suggestions along the way where you can search a longer route and determine where gas stations are or something like that.
Exactly right. Let's think about the power of this, by the way. If we're on the road together, there's 4 of us in the car, and we all have our phones on us, and one of us is using Google Maps. Well, I can go back to my location data. It's my phone and see that, hey, for the last 4 meals, this guy's eating pizza. We're going to make suggestions of pizza restaurants you can stop at on the way home. And if you're not listing your business with Google, if you're not paying to come up in the search results, you're probably not going to come up in the maps either. Now, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that Google's being biased yet, but is it foreseeable that that could be the future? How many of you are Wazers? Yeah, it's awesome, but you'll notice not all restaurant brands come up on suggestions. People who are paying for that advertising. By the way, how many of you total have ever used Waze? I love it. Is anybody using a custom voice on their Waze? What are you using? Oh, that's cool. Wow. Anybody else? Mine's Cookie Monster. I absolutely love it because he'll be like, police presence ahead. You think they want cookie? And it's awesome. And when you get home, he'll be, oh, that good driving. Let's celebrate with cookie. And it like, makes me so happy. It's incredible. Cookie Monster should be on everything. Either that or Bane. I think Bane would be great too. It would be wonderful. I'll teach an entire class as Bane one of these days. But yeah, the bottom line is you're still getting these services and you're getting them because you're paying for advertising. Before we get into B2B business models, because we are moving quick and I need a sip of coffee, I would like to stop for our first question or comment of the day. What would you like to ask or say? Please.
Do you think Google is like more biased towards people who have like a higher stake in the financial market, like in terms of search results?
I think it's conceivable. I mean, I don't have anything to back me up on that. But I think, for example, that if you are, let's think about how double-click networks and Google advertising works in the first place. Basically, anytime you're getting targeted advertising in front of somebody, somebody's paying for it. And if we're somebody, for example, for a very basic comparison, let's say we've got two consumer profiles. One is somebody who makes $150,000 a year. One is somebody who makes $25,000 a year. That person who's making $150,000 a year is probably more likely to be a candidate for BMW, more likely to be a candidate for high-end vacations, more likely to be a candidate for financial services than the $25,000 person. So I could probably negotiate, if I'm Google, a higher per-click rate for keywords to get to that person because there's a higher chance I'm going to make big money for that particular advertiser. So I think it is possible that we maybe do see some bias there, but the same token, even the $25,000 consumer can buy a lot of things at McDonald's and Denny's, and they're still getting a click-through rate. It's just they're more focused on volume as opposed to individual sales. Does that make sense? I hope that was a sensible explanation. I know what I'm thinking, and I hope I said it how I was thinking. That's an excellent question. Any other question or comment from this side of the room? Anything you'd like to know or ask or say? What would you like to ask today? What's on your mind? Adam, what's on your mind today? What are you looking forward to this weekend?
Just relaxing,
Taking a break. What's relaxing going to look like for you, man? What are you going to do?
probably watching a lot of Netflix, sleeping.
I love it. Sounds awesome. I'm sleeping in tomorrow too, man. I'm not kidding. I am not leaving my house before noon, no matter what. So, guys, we're going to jump in now. We've talked about business to consumer. We're going to be talking about business to business. Now, these are like maybe less exciting things on the surface level to talk about, but these are big parts of industry. And when we think about the roots of where e-commerce came from, these are parts of the roots of those models. When we start talking about e-distributors, for example, what we're really talking about are companies that sell parts to other companies. Our text loves using the term or the example of Granger. If we're Ford Motor Company, we're buying ball bearings off somebody. That's business to business. We're buying from a distributor. We use lots of ball bearings. We make Ford pickup trucks. We use lots of aluminum. We make pickup trucks. We're going to be buying from our suppliers in bulk. And you've got one company that can be serving multiple people. One of the things that I think we lose track of in this country, too, is how much shared real estate and infrastructure there is. For example, Ford, General Motors, and Dodge buy a lot of their parts from the same suppliers. So it makes sense for e-distributors. Then we get into what we refer to as e-procurement. I know some of you, a substantial part of you actually, have already had jobs outside of St. Francis. So what does the term procurement mean in a corporate setting? What's a procurement office do? Any thoughts? Let's go to the root of the word. What does procure? If I intend on procuring resources, what do I plan on doing? Emily, if I'm procuring resources, what am I doing? Or I'm getting them, yes. I'm gathering them, I'm purchasing them. Our procurement offices in our companies do all kinds of things for us, not just buying supplies. Sometimes they're even doing things like managing supply chains. Our procurement can even buy benefits plans for us, for God's sakes, if we're outsourcing our medical benefits. So a lot of companies now are doing this for other companies. If I have a small company and I don't have an HR department or a purchasing department, and I need supplies, I need office supplies, I need things to run my company, I can use e-procurement to do that. There's a lot of companies like Ariba that will do that for you, for example. Arriba, isn't that what Speedy Gonzalez always says? Do you guys even know who that is? All right, Arriba, ándale. Yeah, that's what he says. How about that? Then we get into exchanges, guys. What we're going to talk about is the potential of exchanges and how we ultimately did reach that potential. You remember we talked about the utopian visions of early e-commerce. We're talking about the idea of high levels of competition, low prices for everybody. Well, the original concept was, let's say, for example, we have a company. For sake of argument, we're a car company, and we need to buy axles for our cars. We could go to an exchange and have 16 people giving us their best, lowest price for these axles, and we're going to get a great price. Wonderful, right? It sounded great on paper, but what happened ultimately was a lot of these exchanges didn't work out because simply these suppliers were putting themselves in a position where they could no longer compete on cost. The competition was too great, the profit too small, and a lot of the business-to-business exchanges really have not worked out in the long run. There's still companies like Go to Paper, for example. If you're trying to buy paper supplies, you can do this sort of thing. But it comes down to similar revenue models as some of our business-to-consumer types of businesses. Essentially, we're using transactions or commission fees. But if you get too many people competing for the same products, sometimes the competition gets even too fierce. And then we get into what we refer to as industry consortia. Guys, what we're talking about here are very specialized businesses. The best one I can think of is Boeing. Boeing in the airline industry. We're going to talk about Boeing here in a minute. But guys, the idea being that you've got a very limited number of suppliers who can actually give you the parts that you actually need. If you're Boeing and you're making the 737 MAX, God help you, there's going to be very few people who can actually give you the parts that you need, and you're going to vet them heavily before you let them in to bid on these products. Guys, what's going on in the news, by the way, with the 737 MAX? Have you guys been following this? Boeing's had two major crashes of that airliner, which caused it to be grounded last year, which also caused it to cease production. Guys, in terms of exports in the United States, Boeing is the largest exporter of industrial products to the rest of the world in the United States. Like, this actually could have an impact on our whole economy. That's how much Boeing's impacted on the industrial economy is. And so right now, Boeing is probably going to be under the microscope for where they were getting their supplies and how they were running their industry consortia and how well they were vetting their own suppliers for this stuff as well. Then we get into what we refer to as private industrial networks. Has anybody here ever worked for Walmart? Here's the trick, guys. Walmart is a tough business to work for. If you want to talk about, does anybody in this room, by the way, have an interest in supply chain management, for example, as a career path? If you have any interest at all, it's a wonderful career path. And Walmart basically pioneered the modern digitally managed inventory system in the way that they run their stores. So we're talking about private industrial networks. We're talking about ways that companies do businesses within their company to keep commerce going. If you go to Benton, Arkansas, which is where Walmart is based out of, you can go to their command center and determine how many rolls of toilet paper are in any Walmart store in the country. They manage their logistics that tightly. And they use private industrial networks to do that. Walmart finds their suppliers. If you are not getting their supplies to their stores in a timely fashion, they will fine you for it. And the other trick is, too, if you want to do business with Walmart, you've got to be on their private industrial network. So let's say, for example, I'm Kellogg's, big company for Walmart because of all the cereals. Or if I'm Unilever and I make everything from soap to dishwashing detergent, I'm probably doing business with Walmart through their private industrial networks. And what it does, it speeds up things like inventory and restocking. Guys, these are numbers from last year. Check this out, guys. In terms of their demands, what they're basically saying is that anytime they need new supplies from large suppliers, they need it within 1-2 days, and it has to be within 85% of the time. What that means is, if under 85% of your shipments hit the 1-2 day time shipping, regardless of the product, Walmart's going to fine you, or they're going to drop you as a supplier. And with small suppliers, they're giving you a little less of a headache with the 50%. But if you're Unilever, if you're Kellogg's, if you're any of these brands, and you can't meet those demands, you're going to be losing your business with Walmart. So, guys, in terms of how this stuff changes business, we'll get to that in just 1 minute here. But it's really funny when you think about what we're talking about. If you are Kellogg's, for example, and you're selling cereal, you're already talking about a very low markup item and you're selling at wholesale prices. What this really means, guys, is if you can't manage your own logistics, you're putting yourself in a position where you can essentially make your business not profitable. Check this out, guys. Amazon has requirements for the Postal Service. If you get your stuff through the Postal Service, Amazon subcontracts for them. The rates that Amazon is willing to pay per shipment are so low that it actually costs the Postal Service money every time they deliver for Amazon. They cannot deliver for Amazon at a profit based on the hourly rate they're paying for postal employees, based on the hours they have to come open. For example, even as inconvenient as the Laredo Post Office is, they have to open a half hour early every day to meet to meet Amazon's requirements. And if you take a government postal employee who's making a higher hourly rate than somebody who works for Amazon, they are losing money on almost every package they transport for Amazon. And major supplier basically said they're going to be getting away from shipping for Amazon in the foreseeable future. Who am I talking about? It's not the U.S. Postal Service. They're sticking around. Who is it? It is FedEx. FedEx is basically saying, you're making it impossible for us to make a profit. We're no longer going to do business with you. It is foreseeable that companies will make similar statements against Walmart, saying at some point we can no longer keep up with this. By the way, does anybody know how Walmart made themselves into such an empire? How did Walmart grow as big as they are? Logistics management is part of it. How did they get as big as they are? Anybody know? They did not target metropolitan areas. Walmart started in Benton, Arkansas, and they targeted small rural areas. The dominant department store chains were people like Woolworths, which is a brand you've probably never heard of, Sears, JCPenney. They didn't go after their markets. They went after the Evansburgs of the world, and that's how they made their money. And they went from the outside in, and that's how they achieved market dominance. Pretty interesting. Guys, I think I'm taking a look at the faces around here today. You guys look like you're having a day. Are you having a day? Here's the deal. If I can get one, now I'm going to be a little more demanding. If I can get two either decent statements about something you're thinking about involving e-commerce or questions, I'll call class early today to reward you. Adam's on it. What's your question, Adam?
So do you, like I know a lot of other countries, in terms of like collecting data, they're then opt in or opt out. Would you support going to an opt in?
Philosophically, I would. I just can't even imagine the legalese of undoing the system. And to bring all you guys in, are you familiar with what I was talking about? We have in the United States what we refer to as an opt-out culture. That means, for example, your internet service provider can change the rules on you, and you have the option of opting out, but if you don't opt out, they automatically apply to you. Things like data collection, for example, although California is starting to challenge that. We'll get to that in a future class. In Europe, for example, they have an opt-in culture, which means they cannot put your name on a list or collect data from you without your permission. And Adam's question is, do you think the United States will ever go to an opt-in culture? And I guess philosophically, I would say I hope we do, but logistically, I don't know how we can. What do you think?
I mean, I'd support it because it's nice. I noticed, like, if I'm on a foreign website or whatever's over there, it's really nice, like, that they give you, it almost feels like you have more power when it asks you as soon as you get on to accept it or not. And either way, you can still access everything. But I think that the companies that collect data right now are so used to doing things the way they are that they definitely push back, and they have the money to push back against going to a opt-in culture.
Could you imagine the pandemonium and chaos that would ensue when everybody actually has to approve the increase in their credit rate? You know, instead of just saying, well, that's part of the terms and conditions. Yeah, that would get people awake. Excellent question. One more, guys, and we're out. Hunter.
How long do you think like the era of Super Bowl commercials is gonna last with the technology being around now? Because like I feel like I mean I don't have the statistics on it, but I'm assuming people viewing the Super Bowl has gone down over the years of paying $6 million or $4 million, Yeah.
Whatever his name is.
Yes.
Whatever. Yeah. What's his name?
The dance off or whatever. I did see that.
Yeah.
I think that the era is already over. I mean, I think, for example, in the fact these folks are spending multiple millions of dollars to produce these ads, and you can watch them 2 weeks before the game. I think it's already sort of over. And I don't know that I would totally agree that the numbers in the Super Bowl are going down. I think the way we're watching it's different. And I think a lot of folks are saying, well, I'm going to watch it through an app or use a sling box or something like that. I don't think we're not all going to feel that we have to watch it in real time anymore either. So I give it another 5 years before you see a significant drop off. But I mean, in terms of broadcast, we're already seeing it. So, sure.
Well, don't you, even if you stream Super Bowl, you still watch the commercials?
Oh yeah, I mean, it depends. If you're watching it in real time, you're going to still watch the commercials unless you want to skip them. But yeah, I think people will still watch them. But I think a lot of folks who aren't necessarily football fans or don't care about the outcome of this particular Super Bowl, I think will still watch the ads on YouTube. You know, I got to admit, like anytime the Steelers are in it, I'm not really that interested. You know, like, I'll probably turn it on, but I'm not really invested in the game. So, any other questions or comments? Guys, you look like you had a week, so have a weekend. I'll see you later.